Welcome to Bitcoin Escape Plan. Why won't Bitcoin go back above 100K? That's the topic of today's video. The answer is more obvious than it seems, but no one is really talking about it, so that's what I'm going to dive into. As always, we're going to start off the video with the 4-hour chart just to give some value to anyone who is arriving early. Then if you just give me a few minutes to ramble, I'll go over the higher time frames before getting into the daily and what you need to know moving into the end of the week. All right, let's get into it. Like and subscribe if you are enjoying these videos. So today is Thursday. Let's see what happened yesterday that was important to talk about. So yesterday we failed on the 4-hour SMA as well as the daily SMA, which again, I'll get into later in the video. I'll talk about that. But importantly right here, we lose it at about the 4 o'clock hour, I believe, and which is right around the end of the day. So at the end of the day, we, I believe, retested on the daily and then lost it in a big set of volume, or really not even that much volume. It looks like the sell pressure was actually here, but the price is really registering a failure at this guy. And we went up to 94.5, which is a lower wick than this one here. Now, the main topic that I wanted to get into is this guy right here. This is the anchored VWAP. I talk about this all the time. I never redraw it. This is drawn from 2009 on the chart. I wasn't charting in 2009, I wish. So that tool is super useful. Now you can draw one over here. You can draw one for shorter time frames if you want, but the reason why I like to use it on the higher time frames is simple. It tells me the levels that are most important that we're going to touch again. And as you can see, the last time that we interacted with it was in April. So in March, we touch it, and then we break back above it for a time, but can't really sustain above, key levels right there. And then we drop back to it, and we recover it fairly quickly in that instance. That's only a couple days, I believe. Whereas now, over here, where we are now, it's been a fairly significant amount of time that we have spent below it, all the way since middle of November, essentially. Now we can actually snap down to the 1-hour time frame as well, and it'll show us a bit of a different story. So same thing, same anchored VWAP. Let me get rid of this guy so you can see a little bit more clearly. But we're actually on the lower band over here, whereas on the 4-hour, we're just barely touching the upper band. So as you can see, the middle band is down here. And I really don't expect us to see this until we are properly in a bear market. So we don't quite have the confirmation that we need to establish whether we're done running or whether we're going to continue. But until we can reclaim this point, and like I said, this is really the real reason why we are not back above 100K, is this guy right here. Until we can have a positive reaction to that, which as you can see, this is our first attempt back in the end of November after the major drop. We have a couple more attempts right here that failed just below 94K rather, which at the time, this anchor VWAP has been steadily rising the whole time, which is pretty normal still when we're in a bull market rather. But that's going to be the main level that as long as we continue to bounce that, we're just going to continue to consolidate, or we're going to eventually need to test lower at a certain point in time. So what are we looking at for the next couple hours? Well, since we've broken the 4-hour SMA and need to start trending down again, we either are going to interact with the bottom of the Bollinger Band, or the bottom of the Bollinger Band is going to continue opening up. Now, what levels can we be looking at in the short term? Well, this guy looks important to me, 89.1. I believe we talked about that before on Threads. You can remind me in the comments below. I'm pretty sure that was one that we've talked about, as well as this guy right here, 89.8. I think it was 89.9 actually that I was talking about, but it's always kind of relative. Anytime that you see multiple candles like these ones right here, where we're chopping in a range, it's a good indication that price is probably going to return there at some point, even if it is temporary. So over the next couple of days going into the end of the week, that's what I would assume is going to happen. As you can see, it's starting to open up a little bit more. we're going to chop until we're able to reclaim these levels, I would imagine. Which, what is that? That's 90.6, 90.7. 90.4 was the daily pivot level, I believe, which again we'll get into at the end of the video. But that's what we're going to be looking at over the next, say, 4 to 16 hours, is either the Bollinger Band to the downside is going to continue to open up, or we're going to see a push back to the SMA at around 91.4K at the moment. And it really can go either way once the volume returns. But since we've had like an initial pump on FOMC data, which you can go check out in my last video, and then we gave back most of that, there's nothing that's really going to shoot us back bullish immediately. So I think it's more likely that we're going to chop and potentially open up to the downside if we fail these key levels. So that is the 4 hour. Now, let me ramble for a little bit about the monthly and the weekly timeframes, just so we can understand the context of where we are in the market, and again, why we're struggling to get back above 100K. And then I'll be able to go into the daily chart and really dive in on exactly what is going to happen next. So we've talked about this many times in other videos. In November, we lose the monthly SMA. Now, if once we lose the monthly SMA for most assets, what that tells us is we're going to enter a bear market period. Same thing as over here. Once we've touched it, we enter a bear market period. Now, the best indication that we have is this guy over here in 2021, when we got close to it and then didn't break it. We have another indication for us here. This was March, April, where I just was talking about earlier. We got close to it, but didn't break it. But right here, we broke it. So the most likely circumstance still at the moment, even though this average is going to continue to go higher, it will eventually start to round out and go down. So the best indication for us is going to be, where does the price close the month of December? How high above the moving average does it close the month of December? Because as you can see, even here, we're pretty close to the moving average. This guy, we wicked below it, so we interacted with it, but we closed fairly high above it, like a decent amount above it. This next candle was only able to close, or open the bottom of the candle rather, right at where the other one was. So there was enough buying pressure to get it up above that. And then we got here, but we couldn't get to a significant enough level. Market didn't read, failing to get to this point essentially as a high enough level. And then we started to give it back. And you got to remember, we interacted 1, 2, 3, 4 months in a row. We interacted with the daily SMA, or the monthly SMA rather, before we had to give it back. And that is my baseline expectation for what is happening now, is we're going to spend the next 2 months after December, so January and February, still chopping around and interacting with the monthly SMA. Now, the longer that we spend interacting with the monthly SMA, the more likely that we are to break down below it. So I know that a lot of people are talking about us prepping for a higher move, and I've been repeating the same thing over and over. All I care about is the reaction to 106.7K. If we have a strong reaction to 106.7K, I'll shut my mouth. I will stop saying that we are probably just going to continue to give back all of these gains if we have a strong reaction to 106.7K. I haven't seen it yet, and we've barely been able to stay off of the moving average. So our best case still for December is we got to get above here, 96.3. And as you'll see, I'll go over on the weekly chart in a moment, it's higher than that, actually, that we really need to get to in order to show any bullish momentum. But this is big picture. This is what's happening. I don't care if you're looking at the 20-week, the 50-week, the 100-week, the 200-week. It doesn't matter. Once we interact with the SMA, that means two things. That the general trend of the market is most likely shifting. And if you are a long-term investor, this is the second part, that these are historic buy points, even if you do have to be very patient and wait an extended period of time before you're in profit. Anywhere you're buying in here is still a great price. You're still at an average cost of between 25 and 40K Bitcoin. which is still really good at the moment. And you got to keep that in context that what we were doing at the end of the day is stacking Satoshis. You want a bigger bag. That's the point, not just a bigger amount of dollars. You want a bigger amount of Bitcoin. So this is same thing that we were talking about earlier, March and April. This is what it looked like. We had several weeks, I believe 9 weeks below the weekly SMA. We are now at way more than that. We interacted with it all the way over here in September, but we reclaimed it. I'm going to count from here, 1, 2, and then we reclaimed it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're at 10 weeks at the moment, between 10 and 12 weeks. And I would imagine we're still going to need another 2 to 3 weeks to really get confirmation of this level. So this is even higher. This is a weekly SMA. This is even higher than that 106.7K pivot, which as you can see is relevant on both the weekly and the monthly time frame, which is very important. And it's a big reason why we're still below 100K is because we're so far from this weekly moving average. We're really far away from it. So over here, as it's rising, as we're staying above it, it's pretty easy to maintain that level. But as soon as we lose it over here in August, that starts to slow down the rise of the weekly SMA. And now suddenly we're in a downtrend with it, which is not always a bad thing. As you can see, we kind of round out here and then we start to go down a little bit. Although I will say this is a sharper decline than over here. So not quite the same information. Let's see what it looks like over in 2021. So same thing, it starts to round out. It starts to go a little bit higher, and then it starts to go lower. And then, as you can see, we start to rise above it towards that last peak in 2021, but it's pretty much the same thing that once it starts really dropping, it just doesn't recover for a while. So since we've already had a similar pattern where it rounded and dropped and we rose above it, and now same thing, a more sharp decline to the bottom is occurring. Our best case scenario is going to be if this moving average continues to get pulled down lower than 106.7, which inevitably it will over the next, say, 2-3 weeks. Even, quite frankly, on Sunday when the weekly candle closes, I wouldn't be surprised if this gets pulled either right to 106.7 or gets pulled below it. And then that will be, say it gets pulled down to right here to 104.8, which I will say there's a pretty important level right around here. Literally just where I said. So 104.8 is another decent amount of volume here. The one that we're mostly looking at is still 96K. I've talked about that a million times on Threads, that is the anchored volume profile point of control. That means the most buying and selling volume on the chart at the moment is right there. So that is essentially why we're not staying above 100K, is because we keep failing every attempt at 96K. And as long as we continue to fail every attempt at 96K, we have no permission to get back to these levels. And as you can see, where is the volume profile the thinnest? Right here, right around 100K. So I don't know precisely if that just means that a lot of people got liquidated at that level, if not enough people were confident of a buy there, which would make sense if you think about it as 100K being like a major pivot psychologically for people, where they're not sure, okay, if price is descending down to 100K, does that mean that it's a good time to buy, or does that mean that the market has more to drop down to? And obviously it's been the case that the market has had more gains to give away to the downside, which means we really are going to need to fill this gap with a significant enough volume, like this so much volume. And where are the buyers? Where are the buyers stepping in to buy that? I don't think that they're going to be here in the month of December. I talked about it in other videos. My estimation for where Bitcoin is going to be at the end of the year is pretty much right where it is, somewhere between, 86.7 and 94, 95, 96K. I would imagine we're going to be in this exact region that we are, as opposed to, I know a lot of people are talking about at the end of the week, they're expecting us to shoot right up. Videos that I respect, people who I think they give really good analysis. I don't see it on the chart personally. I don't see evidence for it. And the main reason that we are below is just because we're failing these key levels on the anchored volume profile, as well as the anchored VWAP, which you can't even see on the weekly time frame. It's way down here, way down here. And we do interact with it on the weekly, but not until the absolute bottom of the market. So I don't expect this to be relevant anytime soon. I do expect it on the weekly time frame to continue to rise. And in a worst case scenario, if we actually did top in October, that means likely the bottom point is going to be October of 2026. And then, that gives us, where is this? October. That gives us all the way here that it can continue rising. And I don't think it's unreasonable still for a 37K Bitcoin, a 54K Bitcoin being the absolute bottom. Do I think it's going to teleport there tomorrow? No, I do not. No, I do not. I think we're mostly going to chop around, and we still need to actually see how the stable coins actually affect the market. I'm of the opinion that rich people want the price to continue to come lower, so that if they're going to borrow a bunch of money in order to buy a heavy amount of Bitcoin, they're going to want to do it at a lower price, not at 100K. So I don't think that the price is going to stay at 100K forever. All right, that's enough rambling. Thank you so much. Like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me how my analysis is. Now we're going to get into the crux of the video, which is the daily time frame. And this is super important. This is the main thing that we need to be watching right now. Is we've retested the daily SMA and are currently below it, which is not good. I talked about this yesterday on Threads, about how we dropped below the key level. We've had another failure, and this is reading it as a failure of the Bollinger Band, but as we know from looking at the 4-hour chart, we actually had a failure was the anchored VWAP, as well as this guy, the anchored volume profile. We're just way below that level still, not making a significant enough. Still a higher attempt at it, so not the worst news in general. And as you can see, the daily SMA is starting to curve up, which is a good thing. That'll put pressure moving forward to the upside instead of another retest to the downside. And just to put it into context, I do think at the moment that this was the bottom, this 80.5-ish. I do think that was the bottom back there in November, and we're not likely to see it again unless one of two things happens. So it does look like we're going to continue to have sustained pressure to that anchored volume profile. So if we can get that, if we can reclaim the 4-hour anchored VWAP at 95, and we can reclaim 96K on the anchored volume profile, I do think that we start to fill out some of these levels. But the one that I'm really looking at for an invalidation is going to be 105.7 and 106.7. So right in that region, the same way where we're kind of flirting with this range at the moment, we're going to need confirmation of that range for me to believe whether we have legs to go higher or whether we're just going to give it all back and have to go back down to 82 and 80K. So on the daily time frame, what we really need to see over the course of the next couple of days is obviously today we want to close above 89.9, which is where the SMA is currently. We've talked about that level several times on other time frames as well. Really, a best case scenario would be getting above 90.4. That's an older pivot. It's not currently reading as a present pivot. The pivots that have actually opened that are more important are the 94K and 82K has opened to the downside, which is not great. Not a good thing to see that. It's not encouraging for us to see that. So really, what we need to see is, again, I want to see above 90.4K as a close today. We have plenty of time still until 4 p.m. Los Angeles time. We got plenty of time for that to happen. Not a lot of volume today. As you can see, we had a lot of sell pressure on Wednesday and a decent amount of buy pressure on Tuesday, which is just people buying into the hope of rate cuts and then, giving it all back essentially after they did that. So still a decent amount of trades. If you're looking for trades, there's still some pretty good setups. Like what is this? Nope. That's still 7% trade if you're trading options. That's pretty good. That's a good return. Or if you're trading leverage with your Bitcoin, that's still a good return. As you can see, we're starting to give away more of this. I would be looking at this guy here. This is 89.2K. We interact with that over here. We interact with that over here, as well as these guys here. So pretty important that we don't go much lower than 89.2K, I would say, before we start to recover. But we just don't have the volume right now to do that. So it's very possible that Thursday is actually going to close below this SMA once more, which will put pressure to the downside going into the end of the week. And if we just go back to the weekly real quick, where do we want to see a weekly close? Well, not below that. So that weekly close is at 90.4. And what did I just say before? We really, worst case scenario, we want to be above 90.4 because that's the older pivot point. So if we lose that, I would not say that it is a immediately bullish signal. And again, just to recap, the main reason why we're not above 100K again is there's no volume there. It's very thin. We just don't have enough people who are fighting to hold that level. And we have a lot of people at 96 who are going to have to decide at that point, okay, I'm back at my cost basis. Do I want to sell it? Or do I want to buy more in this instance? And I'm just not seeing it going into the end of the year. I think it's more likely that volume would return in January or December. Like maybe that's when people take some rotation from their gold, which is not quite back to all-time highs yet, but it doesn't look done yet. And then same thing for SPY. SPY looks even better than gold in some ways. Like it just doesn't. Yeah, look at that. That's the highest it's ever been. It's the highest it's ever been. So yes, it wicked higher here, but in terms of like the body of the candle, this is the highest it's ever been. So what I would assume is that we're going to see at some point we are going to see a rotation from those back into Bitcoin. We're just not seeing it yet. We just haven't seen the capital flow back. Whereas over here in Bitcoin, compared to what gold and SPY did after they peaked, they consolidated for a bit and then they're very close to their all-time highs. Bitcoin gave it all away. So I don't think that this downside move is completely done yet. I think it's more likely that we consolidate and chop, but as long as we continue to fail 95K and 96K, it's going to continue to pull us lower. I do think that there's a good chance that we can punch past that, but it will require a significant amount of volume that I'm just not seeing on the charts and may take until December to take. But if we have another weekly and monthly close well below that 106.7K pivot, it's just not a good sign. So 106.7K is, I think, the most important one to tell us whether or not the bear market has already started. And 95 and 96K are the most important levels to tell us, are we going to go back above 100 or are we going to be stuck below it? All right, that's enough rambling. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment down below on which level you think is more important, 96 or 106.7. Let me know if you're here from Threads. Let me know if you're here from YouTube, or somehow if you're here from Facebook and Instagram. You let me know. And thanks for stopping by. I'll see you in the next video.